Welcome to the Lasting Love Connection podcast, your leading resource for relationship tips, insights, and interviews. On today's show, we're going to be talking about that voice in your head. The voice that sometimes isn't very nice, is sometimes taking you away from the present moment. And to do that, I've brought Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. He wrote a book called The 5 Levels of Attachment. It's a fantastic book about how knowledge and the voice in our heads oftentimes gets in the way of us experiencing the joys of life. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is the son of Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of the Four Agreements. I think you're going to really love today's show. So, without further ado, let's welcome Don Miguel. Miguel, I want to start by asking you, in your book you talk about a narrator in our head.
When my dad talks about the book The Voice of Knowledge, and it's describing how in our belief system and our thoughts is expressed through this voice that allows us to understand the world. And I didn't when you read it, I didn't really understand it until I started watching that football game, and then my dad's question about why is love the biggest demon in the world. And just watching the commentators in the football game and the commentators and the after the game, the after show game analysis made me realize that that's what's happening in my mind. And as individuals, we take action based on what we're perceiving, what we're able to understand, and from those actions we live our life. So when we pay attention to the voices of the narrators in our own minds of what's right, what's good, what's bad, we give them power. We subjugate our will to their point of view, which is really me, without really knowing that's me. And that understanding of it is my narrators describe the world to me, and they let me know how the world is. But based on what I understand is how I live my life. So the question is, am I paying attention to the narrators based on that conditional love, or is it based on that unconditional love? And from that point of view, that's how I'm going to live my life. And you can say that's the moment where we become aware of the power we have of our own intent.
It's really powerful for me because those narrators are so, these voices, just for anybody that's listening and maybe hasn't read the book, Don Miguel Ruiz is really talking about watching a program on television, watching a sports game, and not being able to turn on the volume. And so just watching the show and then later turning on the volume and hearing, the guys telling you, oh, they're passing a goal, check out this guy, he's a really good player, last year he got divorced, it's pretty amazing. And then they'll kind of keep going through the game, and we're watching life in a similar way. We're looking at people and going, oh, that's John, I don't like John, yesterday he was pretty rude to me, so we can't be friends anymore. Mm-hmm. We're having this whole commentating going on, and so we're really, I guess sometimes we're just really separate from life, from what's actually happening.
Yeah, and when we pay attention completely to the narrator completely hooks our attention. You can say that we perceive 360 degrees. You can say that our attention can go in any direction. You can say that where we put our attention allows us to discern what we want to perceive, because in that bombardment of information, our attention is the most important thing. So when the narrator does its best to control and hook our attention, the question is it hooking us with those voices of what should be, what has to be, of that conditional love, or is it expressing life as is? The vision of Don Quixote, for example. In the story of Don Quixote, there's a moment of truth. He has the choice of seeing windmills, or he has his attachment of wanting to see giants, because according to his attachment, he has to be Don Quixote. If he wants to see Don Quixote, he will see giants. But if he accepts the truth, his name is Don Quijano, Don Alonso Quijano, and there's windmills. They're not giants, they're windmills. You can say that listening to the narrators is the difference between the two. One can describe life as is, which accept us as who we are. Or we can listen to our narrators describe an illusion, and that illusion will take us completely out of this present moment, which means we are no longer present in our own life, and we pay attention to what we want to see, to what the narrators want to describe. And what's important with that is that it has a consequence in our own life. It has a consequence with our relationships. Because you can say that if we have this description of what love's supposed to be, and we are in a relationship with someone we love, then most of our fights we're going to have is not because of what actually is happening between us, but we're fighting because of something we're supposed to be, and the narrators are controlling why this is right, why this is wrong, and it has nothing to do with our relationship. We have no idea what we're even fighting for, because all we see is what we want to see. But if we allow life to be what it is, for us to see life as is, then we'll see a relationship that's right in front of us, and we'll deal with the stuff and the issues that really pertain to us. The difference is, am I going to base my actions on a projected illusion, or am I going to base my actions on the truth that I perceive? The difference is enormous.
Like what you're saying makes me wonder, okay, so if you're in touch with this authenticity, or the life as it is right now, does that mean that you don't get mad anymore? Does it mean that,
No,
if you
of
have
course
little
we get mad. No, that's the thing. Our emotions are real. Our emotions are an expression of how we feel this moment, from anger to rage to happiness to joy. Accepting our authenticity means that I'm accepting this living being that's alive. Who I am, what I am, continuously evolves and it continuously changes. It goes from moments of being completely happy, and then there's moments when I'm going to be upset and mad. The question is that, am I going to love myself conditionally? And if I love myself conditionally, then I'm going to try to pretend to be something I am not. Because if I have this image of Miguel Ruiz Jr. and he doesn't get mad, then every time I do get mad, I'm going to reject myself. Well, am I denying myself simply because I don't live up to an expectation? In that case, then I'm really not being authentic, because I'm not really honoring how I am, how I feel. You can say that the best way to honor our truth is to realize that our emotions are real. What may trigger them may not be real. It may be triggered by a condition, it might be triggered by an assumption, it might be triggered by a belief, it might be even triggered by the truth. The question is being able to discern the difference between that which causes us to react, in which case our emotions act like a car alarm. Our emotions let us know and exposes wounds and issues that we might have hidden. And when that's exposed, we can deal with it. But in honoring who we are and accepting ourselves for who we are, and that authenticity, that authentic self ranges emotional reactions from the most happiest moment of bliss to the most darkest moment of anger. Loving myself unconditionally is accepting that I have the possibility of being both. It's like the yin and yang. There's a light and there's a dark side. And accepting the whole is accepting both sides. Now, I have the freedom to choose to make my choices based on that unconditional love or conditional love. I can have the choice of making decisions based on my anger as much as making decisions based on my happiness. But it is that unconditional love that's going to help me when I'm in my dark moments in my life. That's the thing that's going to take me out. That's the thing that's going to help me get through those dark moments. And when life is good, when life is sharing a beautiful moment, it is that unconditional love that's going to allow me to enjoy it when it's there. So you can say conditional love expects me to be a certain way, and I have to follow through in order to accept myself. And you can say that my narrators are the judges, or the basically the executors of my own domestication. But if I turn them into my ally, which basically means that they're the voices of expressing my own truth, expressing who I am, what I am, and accept an expression of love, then my thoughts and my knowledge are an ally that allows me to function in the world. It allows me to express who I am. It allows me to see the world as is, and allows me to interact with the world as is. And that's the beauty of it all. You know, the mind. What we're describing with the voice of the narrators, we're describing the mind. Is the mind conducting itself based on conditional love, or is the mind conducting itself based on unconditional love? Depending on how I see the world, that's going to be the reality I'm going to be living in.
It's interesting because you're saying that one thing I thought really interesting about what you were talking about is that we have a choice about the voices.
Mm-hmm.
We can listen to the voices, and that to me was that's a pretty big statement, because a lot of times I tend to hear these voices and I believe them. That voice is me. That's my belief. And what you're saying is it?
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, is that the belief that you really want to believe into, or is that a voice? Is that just a narrator that you can say, hey, pause, let's hit the pause button, and let me think about that for a moment?
Exactly. We have a choice in saying yes and no, even to ourselves. You see, in part of the answers to the levels of attachment of, do I control knowledge or does knowledge control me? When knowledge controls me, my yes and my no's are automatic. I automatically say yes and I automatically say no without even thinking, because my attachment to my belief is already controlling my will. For every yes I give, something will be manifested. For every no I give, something won't. That's how I use the energy of my life. So when I say yes and no without even thinking, without as an automatic reaction, then what I know controls my free will. It controls my intent. But when I apply skepticism, which is to me simply a way to describe the action of withholding my yes, withholding my no, because basically withholding my intent, I'm able to listen. And extending that ability to listen, I can have one more time my freedom of choice, which is to say yes when I want to say yes, to say no when I want to say no. And that includes my thoughts, that includes my beliefs, that includes everything I know. Because if I automatically make actions without thinking about it in my own mind, then I'm doing the same thing with the exterior. You know, if a political party has my attachment, or a religion, or a certain movement, or a certain way of life, then that thing has control over me. But if it's happening where it matters most, in my own mind, and I can listen to my thoughts, and in my own thoughts I can hear myself, and I can say, Miguel, I believe you. No, Miguel, I don't believe you. Then I have free will. That's freedom. Because at that very core, I'm able to apply that with everyone around me. I'm able to apply that with the people I love, but also with the people who are speaking out in the world, from politicians to anyone who has a voice, who's controlling the world. But the most important part is recognize that the only thing I control is my life, and that is what matters most. In my life, from the moment I am born to the moment I die, the only person living in this body is me. And in the way I make my life, how I live my life, how I enjoy my life, comes down to that basis of, do I control my intention? Do I control how I say yes, how I control no? And to me, that is the freedom I have. I can't give what I don't have. If I don't have freedom in my own mind, how can I give freedom to anyone else? Or how can I share that freedom with anyone else? How am I able to love unconditionally when all I have is conditional love in my own mind? And understanding how the voices of knowledge are expressed in the form of life and attachments and subjugation and imposing and engaging, one can hear that I always have a choice, even with my own thoughts. Thus, if there's thoughts in my mind that are negative, I have the free will to say, no, I don't believe you, and I won't live my life based on that negativity. And if there's thoughts in my mind that is positive, if I want to say yes to that, I can say yes to that, because I have the same freedom to say yes to the negativity as too. We were just talking about this the other day to a friend of mine, and we are talking about how we say we want to stop being judgmental, and we apply that concept. We can either apply domestication to stopping to make judgments. For example, the best way to accept myself is I don't make judgment. Okay, that means if I make a judgment, I have to judge myself if I do. So every time I don't make a judgment, I give myself the reward, which is my own self-acceptance. But if I do make a judgment, then I'm going to judge myself and punish myself, and I'm rejecting myself. I'm using this method of domestication to control who I am, because I want to domesticate myself to not making a judgment.
Right.
But I'm just replacing one program for another.
Right.
The contrast to that is to make choices because we want to. For example, I pay attention one day and I become aware that I make judgments. And I make the decision, I don't want to make judgments anymore. I am familiar with the other method, but the other method of doing it is this. I become aware in my life when I make judgments. When I make judgments of other people, what's the circumstances, what's the trigger point that makes me be judgmental? As I pay attention to it, I become aware when a moment happens. So, as I'm living my life and I recognize that moment coming up, instead of judging myself, I simply says, I don't want to make a judgment. So, when that moment comes up and I recognize the trigger, at that moment of awareness, I have a choice. If I say yes, I'm going to judge, then I'm going to judge because I want to judge. If I say I don't want to judge, then I'm not going to judge. And I'm not going to judge because I don't want to judge. The difference is that in one, with conditional love, I'm doing it for the reward of accepting myself. And the other one, I already accept myself. I love myself. So when I say yes to judging, I will judge. If I say no to judging, then I won't judge. But the cool thing is that the automatic reaction is broken. I've stopped the automatic reaction. And if I say, no, I don't want to judge, then it's completely broken. So it's a matter of practice at that moment. It's a matter of practice recognizing at every moment, recognizing that trigger point, that I have a choice at that very moment. That's when I express my free will. Right. Because I'm doing it not because I have to, but because I want to. And I'm completely aware that I'm doing it. So the narrators can either disguise that moment and me living in an illusion and never recognize the trigger point, or I become aware and I recognize the trigger point and make a choice in that moment. It's like, for example, if we're addicted to alcohol and we want to stop, and I recognize the triggers that make me want to drink. If I say yes to drinking, I'm going to say yes to that. But if I don't want to drink, I won't drink. And I'm going to make the choice to say no. At that moment, I'm expressing my free will and how I want to live my life, which is a whole different matter when we put conditional love. And if I do drink, I'm going to punish myself and judge myself. When I say, no, I don't want to drink, mainly because that's what I don't want to do, I'm expressing free will. And that comes from accepting myself for who I am, loving myself for who I am, and I'm making a choice based on that. Of course, if I want to drink, I'll drink. But if that's what I don't want, if I don't want to drink, then I won't.
So you make it sound so easy.
Oh, it's the most difficult thing because it's about breaking a habit. You see, the automatic reaction is easy because it's what we know. It took us years to master it. What we're describing here is about developing a discipline. And the discipline is the discipline of being aware. At this very moment, I am aware of my choices. So the discipline thus is not really lying on making the choice of yes or no. The discipline is paying attention to my awareness and being aware that at that moment I have a choice. And that requires one, awareness, but more important than that is how I got my awareness. And the awareness is basically being able to pay attention to the truth around me. Being able to let go of the illusion that hides my truth. Like going back to the example of Don Quixote. Do I prefer the giants or do I prefer the windmill? If I prefer the giants, then I am giving complete attention to my illusion. But if I prefer the windmills, I'm paying attention to my truth. And in recognizing my truth, I can hear and see what is my trigger points. And when I become aware of them, because I know the truth, that's where the practice comes in. And that's the hard part, because once we recognize that, and we able to recognize those moments of choice, those moments of the trigger, then at that point, making the choice is easy, because the hard work is done. I've recognized the truth, and in that moment of truth, I can say and give my choice. Yes, if I want to. No, if I don't want to.
You're talking about something, really big, because again, so often I don't actually stop and look at the narrator in my voice and go, that's a voice that I have a choice about. When I picked up your book for the first time, I got an email about it for an early release, and I was thinking 5 levels of attachment, and looking at it and going, okay, it's about knowledge. And I just kind of overlooked it. I mean, I was just kind of like, knowledge, yeah, I mean, I need it. And then I read your book, and I just thought, wow, there's so many times that I think that my knowledge is so concrete that is the way it is. Like if someone says something to me, that guy's rude. That's just the way it is. Or, the world is square. Like you take these ideas and we don't question them. And your grandma's question to you was really profound and probably a pretty difficult question to actually really go into.
Well, it's because it's at the time when she asked me, I was 14 years old. I have no idea.
Right.
But as I grew up with life and life teaching me, you could say the levels of attachment describe the level of energy I put into something, and I invest of myself. So the more I attach myself, the more I lose awareness. So you can say up to level 5, when I'm putting all my energy into this attachment, my own energy is actually blinding me. But if I use little energy, just engage life, because the truth requires very little energy to believe, because the truth is right there. It exists whether we believe it or not. But the beautiful thing about a belief is that it's truth for as long as I believe in it. The moment I stop believing in it, the belief no longer exists. So if we look at knowledge in that way, knowledge is a clean reflection of life. It's the instrument we use to understand the world and one another. It's the most beautiful thing we have in sharing with one another and creating the dream of us, or the society, or what we know. Like for example, you and I right now are talking to each other because 150 years ago, or something like that, Edison wanted to light up a room with electricity. And then Tesla came in, and his student, and he used AC and DC, and they both combined because Chase owned both of them. And it all came from wanting to illuminate a room, and now you and I are using electricity to talk to one another. We're not even using a landline, we're using internet and electricity to communicate visually to one another. And 150 years from lighting up a room like a light bulb to grabbing the computers that are allowing us to talk, there's a lot of knowledge that happened in between it. Every generation build and build with inspiration, and we just created something beautiful and allows us to grow and expand. So knowledge in that sense is the most beautiful thing. But when we become so attached to it, we're actually stopping that growth from actually happening. Because the worst thing that could happen is that knowledge changing. And that's the thing about knowledge. Knowledge changes with life. The truth changes as life progresses. So when we have an attachment to something, when we invest so much of ourselves, we're actually stopping that thing from growing. We're stopping it from expanding. It no longer has life. And because that happens because all of a sudden the idea becomes more important than life. And when that happens, well, we're no longer seeing life as is. We're only seeing what we want to see. For example, if we go back to the image of Don Quixote, it requires a lot of energy for Don Quixote to see those windmills, to convince everyone that everything he sees is truth. But once he sees the truth, it requires very little effort. But he wants the illusion so bad. I once got the question, when was the moment that we lost awareness of our authentic self? The answer is quite simple. The moment we preferred the lie over the truth. Or you can say, the moment we prefer the illusion over the truth.
So are there some pointers? Because, like, what you're talking about is really profound, really deep, and yet it can be complex or it can be simple. And I'm curious, have you found any pointers that when someone says, how do I know whether I'm seeing the truth or I'm seeing an illusion? Have you found any pointers that you might say to somebody to help them kind of awake?
Well, the only pointers we have is this physical body. My heartbeat, my breath. It's the truth. Because when we're trying to find truth through knowledge, the thing about it is that it's completely subjugated to agreement. When we look for truth through knowledge, through an idea, well, it's always going to be distorted because everyone has to put it in a language we can all understand.
Right.
When that happens, that truth can get distorted because of the agreement. It can be pulled in so many directions because we want it to be in its own way. So the basis is accepting life as is. Starts with our own body. My breath and my heartbeat are real because I'm real. I'm alive. And then from there, everything else is just an agreement. You can say that in life, the only truth that we know is life and death, the cycle of life. Something will be manifested, something will be unmanifested. If we use the levels of attachment, the only truth that exists is 1 and 0, 1 and 0. When we let go of level 1, when we pass away, we go down to 0. There's no life. You can say 1 and 0 is the only truth there exists. Everything else is just an agreement. So you can say the pointer is life itself. I am alive. You are alive. You are breathing, you're experiencing, you're perceiving, and you're projecting. Understanding from there, everything is based on agreement.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like if you and I were sitting next to each other, the truth would be if we hold hands, that's the truth. Why are we holding hands? That's where the agreement comes in. Why is it happening? Why is he holding my hand? Why is this? And we create a story that allows us to understand and comprehend what is happening. So you can say from there, searching for the truth through knowledge is completely that subjugation and can be easily distorted, which means the best way to arrive to the truth through the knowledge is being able to let knowledge be a clean reflection of life, to let it be something that describes life as is, which means that we won't distort it with our own personal importance, or you can say with our own attachment. Because that's the thing. At level 5, I'm definitely going to distort everything. At level 4, I'll distort something in order to fit my own self-acceptance. At level 3, I can actually let knowledge be what it is, but I have to identify myself with it. And at level 2, preference, I can totally let knowledge be what it is, because when the moment passes, I still am aware of what I am, which means I won't distort it. So if we interact with each other at level 2 and 3, very likely we'll be able to reach an agreement of what the truth is, because our unattachment or our ability to let knowledge be a clean reflection of life will get us closer to the truth. In science, there's hypotheses, there's theory, there's experimentation, and then there's fact. There's a clean, you can say with science, the way to reach truth is that there's all these hurdles it has to cross. And it'll only be truth for as long as the experiments can be repeated over and over again through different methods. And if that method comes out with the same result every time, then it becomes the truth. There's a discipline to that truth. We can let science be science. But when we're attached to it, we want to jump from hypotheses to fact. Without going through theory, without going through experimentation, we jump from theory to fact because we love it so much that it has to be the truth. So it all comes down to discipline on how we're able to find the truth within those through knowledge. But if we allow ourselves the ability to see what's the pointers that allow me to see the truth as this, then we go to the pointers of what we are able to experience. And what we experience is life. My breath, my heartbeat, this body. Understanding that my descriptions of what I feel is a language that I use to try to understand it. But the experience is the truth. My explanation of my experience is an agreement. If I let it be and understand that my experience is just an experience and let the experience be the truth, then that's the truth. So from there, it's all about the agreements you and I have in understanding one another, which comes down to the willingness to listen. And we go back to the original question. I have the freedom to agree and disagree with my own voices, with the narrators in my mind. And I have the same freedom to agree and disagree with you as individuals. But it always comes down to that one point. I have the freedom to choose to agree and disagree. But if I have also the ability to listen, then of course we can see how each other creates our own life.
Such liberating work that you're doing. As I've talked to you and you've shared this wisdom, I felt myself thinking and feeling some areas in my life where I've become kind of a level 5, you know, and I didn't really know I was a level 5 because just so attached to those thoughts that you just become completely blind that you're even at a level 5.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, I felt myself go to level 4, 3, and then kind of 2, like, oh, those are ideas that I'm having, but they're not certainly the truth. This is what is, and then these are the thoughts about that.
There you go. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
You got it.
At this point in the interview, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and I were not able to reconnect on Skype and finish our interview, but nonetheless, I wanted to give this interview to you and offer you the great insight and wisdom that he did share. If you're interested in his work and further Toltec wisdom teachings, I highly recommend his website, miguelruizjr.com. And if you've enjoyed this interview and want to get more insights on how to improve your relationships, I highly recommend subscribing to the channel and also checking out our website, lastingloveconnection.com.